So the story about Pinchas is to leave a legacy, to leave an inspired legacy that lasts. Because let me just reorganize the deck chairs here. The whole thing about Pinchas is that because of faith, because of love, because of what he saw, an inspired legacy was left. And we're going to unpack that a little bit. And we're going to consider and say, but what would be the applications for us today, going forward? So, first off, a few things that I think are well familiar with respect to Pinchas and this Torah reading of today. And the first is that what he received for his for his set apartness, for his dedication, for his love, was an everlasting office. And from unpacking that a little bit, going to the fact that it is the highest possible office that there might be and can be, and that actually it's an invitation to everybody. This week's reading is effectively an invitation to everybody to say, may the Pinchashim, may the Pinchases of the world, the Pinchashim, arise. Okay, so we start with, and Jehovah spoke to Moshe saying, Pinchas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, has turned back my wrath. Not Pinchas' wrath, my wrath from the children of Israel. In the opening verses, we read something very interesting here, because what he is saying is, what Pinchas did saved many people's lives. Yes, it cost the lives of 2 people, but in the process, it saved many people's lives. Dedication, set apartness, focused on Yodei Vavai, being obedient to his word saves lives. Immediately there's a message to each one of us. If we are to act in the idiom, in the spirit of Pinchas, we will save lives. Can there be a higher calling than that? To save the life of another person. Pinchas saved many lives because he turned back the wrath of Yodei Vavai from the children of Israel. So this is actually a calling to each one of us to say, save people's lives. But for that, stand in the office of Pinchas. Because he was ardent with my ardor in their midst. He had the spirit, the ruach of our Father. And he saw as our Father saw. And he acted accordingly and saved lives. So that I did not consume the children of Israel in my ardor. Because he was on his way to destroy many people's lives. And Pinchas stopped it. So sometimes you can think in terms of what Pinchas did. Stood up, went out, went to that tent, took his spear and killed 2 people. Like, yeah, guy, this is a bit hectic. Imagine if he hasn't done that. Well, that would have been hectic. Therefore say, I am giving him my covenant of peace. And I've color-coded it, the Hebrew and the English. So the green goes with the green, and the yellow with the yellow, and the blue with the blue. Lachem emor heneini noten loet berit shalom. So, right off the bat there is the word I am my, which I've highlighted in yellow, hineni. But hineni is a well-familiar word. Where do we find it? Here am I, send me. That's hineni. So, when our Father say, I am my, which is then translated in the English, is actually saying, behold, here am I in your presence. I will personally, noten, which is derived from Natan, I will personally, in your presence, like here am I, give it to you. The Brit Shalom, the covenant of peace. It's very personal. It's very, very personal from Yorevave to Pinchas. It's not something which is on a distance or far off. And it shall be to him and to his seed after him a covenant of an everlasting priesthood. We're going to unpack that a bit, because he was ardent for his Elohim and made atonement for the children of Israel, because he saved people's lives. So there's the begats, the things that we don't read in Scripture, because we can't, one, pronounce the names, and two, it doesn't make any sense to us. But there's the list of begats. But occasionally they're very valuable, because Eliezer brought forth Pinchas, and I'm not going to read the rest, eventually ending with Tzadok, and on the right-hand side you can see the fathers from Abraham right through to Tzadok, with Eliezer and Pinchas at number 8 and number 9 there. Those begats are very important because it establishes truth. It establishes facts. It establishes that what we're dealing with is not fiction. Tzadok was David's high priest. He was the first high priest in the Temple of Solomon. So, there's this connection from Abraham right through to Tzadok, through Eliezer, through Pinchas, right into the tabernacle at the temple of David, and then actually Solomon. But yeah, David's first high priest. And is it therefore surprising that when we fast forward a few years to a date unknown in the Millennium Temple, Ezekiel 43, and the esteem of Yorevave came into the house by the way of the gate facing the east, and the Spirit took me up and brought me into the inner court, and see, the esteem of Jehovah filled the house, as it was in the wilderness. The glory of our Father fills the house, as it was in the wilderness. And then, just a little bit later, and you shall give a young bull for a sin offering to the priest, the Levites, who are the seed of Tzadok. And there's a connection here between the temple of Solomon, the first high priest, Tzadok, and the ones that will serve in the Millennium Temple after the seed of Tzadok. So it's as if the Millennium Temple is just a continuation of Solomon's temple. The fact that it was 3,000 years in between and few things that has happened is almost irrelevant. It's the same thing. and it's the seeds of Pinchas. It's the direct result of what happened this week in this week's Torah reading, what we're reading here in the Millennium Temple. So, while I was preparing and I was thinking about it, and I say, but hang on. So, Pinchas, everlasting priesthood, through Pinchas, Tzadok, Millennium Temple, connecting the Solomon Temple, the Millennium Temple. And we as people on this side, with the expectation that at some point in time in future that there might be a Millennium Temple, perhaps in our generation, perhaps there's something interesting for us to read in Pinchas when it deals with this, with the millennium and the period which we are in. Let's see how it's going to unfold. Ezekiel 44. But the priests, the Levites, the sons of Tzadok, are guarded my duty of my set-apart place. When the children of Israel went astray from me, they shall draw near to me to serve me, and shall stand before me to bring to me the fat and the blood, declares Master Jehovah. As it was in the wilderness, as it was with Solomon's temple, so it will be in the Millennium Temple. Same line, same people, no separation, no tension. It is a continuation of the same office. They shall enter my set-apart place, and they shall draw near to my table to serve me, and they shall guard my charge. An absolute continuation. There is no tension. And then at the end of chapter of Ezekiel 48, for the priests of the sons of Zadok, who are set apart, who did guard my charge, who did not go astray when the children of Israel went astray. Hang on. We're talking about the Millennium Temple here. He's referring back to this week's Torah reading. That's why it's the children of Zadok, because of what Pinchas did, who did not go astray when the children of Israel went astray. Imagine that. Connecting the Millennium Temple to today's Torah reading. So perhaps we should investigate this reading a little bit with a different, sort of through different lenses. Because perhaps what Pinchas did is phenomenally important to us today. And then the last verse of Ezekiel 48, the last verse of the book, and the name of that city from that day is Yehovah Shammah. So, if I think about Pinchas and Pinchas' story and where he stood up for the name of our Father, he says, but Yehovah is here. You cannot do this where Yehovah is present. Yehovah is here, it's His tabernacle, it's His name, it's His honor, it's His glory, it's His set-apartness. You cannot conduct yourself in this way by having this immoral act, blaspheme in the face of our Father where He is present. It's the last verse of Ezekiel. Yehovah Shammah, set apart. Yehovah is there. So there's a phenomenal connection between the story of Pinchas and the book of Ezekiel. And we'll unpack a few others as well as we move along. But when we say, I am giving him my covenant of peace, Hineni, behold, I am here, I will give it to you personally. We realize that verse is still true today. It's still playing itself out in all kinds of detail. We still to expect and respect those words because of the connection which Ezekiel is putting us in no uncertain terms. And we're definitely not to act or speak against it. Because it's Yodai Vave who acts as the guarantor of that verse. He said it will be that, and therefore it will be so. He's put His name to it. And therefore, if we speak against the priesthood of Zadok, or against the events of Ezekiel 44 to 48, then what are we actually doing? We're speaking against Yodai Vave, who's the guarantor of that. Because he has given Zadok and the seed of Zadok this office based on this week's reading. So we need to be very careful how we speak. And not just us, obviously, but 8.5 billion people in the world needs to be careful how they conduct themselves according to this. Because you do not want to stand in opposition to this temple and to this word and to this covenant of peace. Because it is the highest office. It's not just an everlasting office. It is the highest office that there can be. We read in Ezekiel 34, and I shall make a covenant of peace with them. Question is, who's the them? We'll come back to that in a second. And I shall make them and the places all around my hills a blessing, and shall cause showers to come down in their season. Showers of blessing they are. And the trees, they are people. Trees are a placeholder for people. And the people of the field shall yield their fruit in their, and the earth yield their increase, and they shall be safe in their land. The people's lives will yield fruit in their due season. And they shall know that I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. It's not a tree. It's people who will know that I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. When I have broken the bars of their yoke, of the people, of the trees, when I've broken the yoke from their backs. And I shall deliver them, those trees, I shall deliver those trees, I shall deliver them from the hand of those who enslaved them, those trees. I will deliver them from them who enslaved them. And they shall no longer be a prey for the Gentiles. Those trees will no longer be a prey to the Gentiles. And the beast of the earth shall not devour them. Those trees will no longer be devoured. And they shall dwell safely with no one to make them afraid. Wow. You really want to be part of that forest. You really want to be part of those trees. Because if you think about it, that's a nice forest. I mean, there's no one will make you afraid. You will dwell safely. Nothing will devour you. Nothing will enslave you. And Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh will deliver you. You really want to be part of that forest. And it's a big forest. And I shall raise up for them, that forest, a planting place of name. And they shall no longer be consumed by hunger in the land, nor bear the shame of the Gentiles. And they shall know that I, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, their Elohim, am with them, and that they, the house of Israel, are my people. That's the them. That's the forest. It's sitting here, and many other places around the world today. And now it makes sense. And I shall make a covenant of peace with the house of Israel, who are my people. And you will be safely there. You will not be devoured there. You will be protected by this incredible covenant of peace. There's a little gap there, you see. There's something standing there. Because it's unpacking that line that says, I will make a covenant of peace. It's a very special way how it's been stated there in the Hebrew. It says, Vecharati lechem berit shalom. Vecharati, again, green color coded, means to cut. But berit, for covenant, is also a cutting. So it's a cutting of a cutting. And I will cut a peace cutting. How serious is he about this? I will cut a peace cutting with you. That word for karat, which means to cut, Genesis 9, Genesis 15, the first and the second time which it occurs. The first time is with a cutting with Noah, and the second one, the cutting with Abraham. It's that theme that continues. It takes it right from Noah, chapter 9, Genesis 9, Abraham, Genesis 15, and take it forward. I will cut with you a cutting of peace, house of Israel, because you are my people. Now, if you think, and you put that into connection with Zadok, which we've just said, you see this beautiful connection emerging. That those who are part of the house of Israel are part of this connection and this story, with Pinchas providing us valuable information. Isaiah says the following, also about the peace covenant. For a little while I have forsaken you, but with the great compassion I shall gather you. I think we're in the little while component now. But with great compassion I shall gather you. In an overflow of wrath, I hid my face from you for a moment, but with everlasting kindness I shall have compassion on you, says Jehovah, your Redeemer. For though the mountains be removed and the hills be shaken, my kindness is not removed from you, nor is my covenant of peace shaken, says Jehovah, who has compassion on you. O you afflicted one, tossed with storm and comforted, see, I am setting your stones in antimony, and shall lay your foundations with sapphires, and shall make your battlements of rubies, your gates of crystal, and all your walls of precious stones, and all your children taught by Yodhe-Vavhe, and the peace of your children great. It's the same language that's been used in Revelations 21 and in the book of Tobit, which is a book in the Apocrypha. So there's a clear connection between the covenant of peace, the book of Ezekiel, which we think speaks about the 7th day or the millennium, and then the 8th day, Revelations 21, and the temple that is to come. And then it's in this context where this famous line stands. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Every tongue which rises against you in judgment you shall prove wrong. It's in this context of the covenant of peace. It's in this context of the Millennium Temple. It's in the context of, I will safeguard the house of Israel. The enemies will not destroy her. So it's in this context that we say, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. I think often that sentence is quoted in various different contexts where it is not really appropriate perhaps. But this is the peace in which it comes. It's clearly within the covenant of peace. And that covenant, that which will not be shaken. So, part of what the story about Pinchas is unpacking for us is this whole story about legacies. And it's very easy to think about Pinchas' legacy. We've just started to unpack that a little bit. But essentially there are several legacies that are being discussed within this Torah reading, in the story of these chapters. We're just going to unpack a few of them, 5 to be exact. So the first one is about Pinchas, Numbers 5. And see, one of the children of Israel came and brought to his brothers a Midianite woman before the eyes of Moshe and before the eyes of all the congregation of Israel, who were weeping at the door of the tent of meeting. And when Pinchas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest saw it, he rose up from among the congregation, took a spear in his hand, and he went after the man of Israel into the tent and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her belly. And the rest we have discussed in terms of the legacy, Tzadok, the Millennium Temple, and the rest. Let's just put it sort of a little bit in boxes. So, in terms of different headings, the zeal. He saw as Yodhe-Vavhe saw, and he acted according to that. There's a big challenge for us. Can we see as Yodhe-Vavhe sees and act according to it? And be ready for action. Perhaps we can see it, but we're not always ready for action. No, what will the people say? Or whatever the case might be. We're not ready for action. But the covenant matters. And Pinchas said, there will be no mixing here. And what was the result of it? The covenant of peace. Clearly he went oblivious to the fact that there's actually going to be a reward. He just knew he had to act. And then the future was the covenant of peace. Because he drew near to him, because the tabernacle is set apart, and the outcome is the covenant of peace. But there are 5 of these different legacies embedded within this reading. And we're going to unpack them likewise. The next one is about the priests. And it came to be after the plague that Yodhe-Vavhe spoke to Moshe, and Eleazar, son of Aaron, said to him, take a census of all the congregation. But the census is to lift up the names. because of the zeal of the priests, where everyone counts. And everybody counts in like manner. Be ready for battle. Because that's the point of this census. Be ready for battle. Be ready for action. And even after everything that has happened, there's still as many as the sand of the sea, speaking to the covenant with Abraham. But you will know your destiny. You will cherish the future because of the covenant going forward. And draw near to him as a priest. And so it's a set aside of the people. And here are we today, still because of that. And we can still carry this mantle with us. We're still part of the sand of the sea part. We are still the part that say we know our destiny. We are the priests, according to Melchizedek, set apart for our Father, for our Master, taking this legacy one step forward. Then there's the daughters of Zelophehad, eh? How do you pronounce it? Zelophehad. This is an interesting one. I think let's just read it. And then came the daughters, and they stood before Moshe at the doorway of the temple, saying, "Our father died in the wilderness, yet he was not in the company of those who were met together against Jehovah in the company of Korah, but he died in his own sins, and he had no sons. And the daughters speak what is right, and you should certainly give them the possession of inheritance." And they says, "We're 5 daughters, so we don't have any inheritance now." And they went to Moses and they asked, "Now, it's not really, we don't have anything now because we don't have a brother. So our father's land is disappearing." Effectively asking Moses, now what now? Moses said, "I don't know, let's find out." He went and contemplated, inquired from our father. And my interpretation of it might be wrong, but my interpretation of it is basically our father said to him, there's a protocol to be followed for operational administrative purposes in terms of the legacy going through the line of the husbands and the sons. But don't make something like that a point of theological dispute. It's righteousness. Give them their land. And that suddenly opens it up for me. How often do we make theological disputes about things that are just organizational and administrative? The zeal is about the inheritance. Let's focus on that. There's an inheritance. Seeking righteousness. Honoring the father, their biological father, by knowing their destiny, getting place in the land going forward. And the outcome? A land is set aside for them. And likewise for us, because if you think about it, we're not in the biological line. And we pray, and because of his kindness, his grace, there's access to the land. Moses. And Jehovah said to Moses, "Take Joshua, son of Nun, with you, a man in whom is the Spirit." And Moshe did as Jehovah commanded him, and laid his hands on him, and commissioned him. And so the legacy of Moses continued through Joshua. He who walked in the Torah, gave the Torah to us. His battle ready is because he was the most humble man ever. We're going to talk about humbleness, or then the opposite about humbleness a bit later. The covenant, the word matters. And there's a future. Joshua, Yehoshua, is a type of Messiah. The future matters. Draw near to him, and the outcome is the Spirit and the Torah that will guide us going forward. And the last one is Bnei Yisrael. And then we'll put it together. And Jehovah spoke to Moshe, saying, "Command the Bnei Yisrael, and you shall say to them, take heed to bring my offering, my food for my offerings made by fire as a sweet fragrance at their appointed times." And so, what did Bnei Yisrael do? They were obedient, and they did that. obedience is the strongest form of spiritual warfare there is. There is no stronger form of spiritual warfare than obedience. In total dedication to our Father. Worship Him and worship the King, and they will cherish the future. These 5 samples that we receive from this Torah reading, if we put them together, we see an incredible tapestry emerging. Because if we look at the right-hand side, those 4 things is what defines any kingdom, earthly or spiritual. You cannot have a kingdom if there's no people. You cannot have a kingdom if there's no land. You cannot have a kingdom if there's no rule book. And you cannot have a kingdom if there's not a king. And so each one of those facets of what defines a kingdom is being unpacked in different minds of detail through different people, through different agents. And so we see an agent representing the people, an agent representing the land. Likewise with the Spirit and the Torah, as well as then the King. And there's the kingdom, defined within this reading. There's a king, a people, there's a worshipping Him, a land, and those dedicated to Him. That's the kingdom. Are we then surprised about Pinchas and him running forward to the millennium through Tzadok? And that the kingdom is everlasting? No, because the kingdom has been specified in this reading. There's a land, there's a people, there's a spirit, and a rule book, and there's a king. Because it's all bind together. This land, people, rule book, king has been binded together. The legal basis for it in a covenant. This covenant that is the legal basis and the constitution of this kingdom. And so when we, children of Israel, people of His house, worshipping Him, there's a legal basis on which we stand. It's not just empty words, because a covenant is a legal contract. But there's a challenge here. For us to be able to see this kingdom, we have to see as Pinchas saw, and see what he saw. And then we seesaw, eh? If we see like he saw, then we seesaw. So let's seesaw a little bit, and we see how we can see like Pinchas saw. I think I've messed up the grammar there completely, but never mind. So Numbers 25, in terms of the various dimensions, and I've read most of it already. Let's just say it started off by the fact that the 2 elements that we've dealt with, it was his zeal that saved many people's lives. And because of that, there's an everlasting covenant. But what did he see? He saw immorality at the tabernacle mocking El. That's what was taking place there. But not just that. He saw leaders scorning leadership. Because both the man and the woman, they were both leaders or the child of leaders. It's one thing when people are in uprising against the leadership. It's a different thing when a leader scorns another leader. Because then you've got a what? Leadership crisis. When people are unhappy with leaders, well, then you've just got people unhappy with leaders. When leaders are unhappy with leaders, you've got a leadership crisis, which means you split the congregation. So he saw the potential of a split in the congregation because leaders were scorning leadership. And then he saw the idolatry, the witchcraft, and the mixing that was taking place. So he saw 3 things. There's quite a lot of detail that's been given in this section for us. And I believe this is the reason why we've been given all this detail. Who the names were, and what they did, and where they did it, and what he did. not all of Torah is full of such detail. But this one is really gives us a very beautiful picture, ugly picture of what has happened, but a lot of detail. And I believe it is because we need to see those three things that Pinchas saw. The immorality, the leadership scorning leadership, the idolatry, witchcraft, and the mixing. So that's what he saw. That's what he did. He saved many people's lives through his action. And that's what he received. All in one. See, did, receive. And we have to ask the question now, is there a possibility that those three things are tied together somehow in some places? Because if they are tied together, then we need to be very careful and be very watchful as Pinchas was. In the book of Judas, we read the following. But Michael, the chief messenger, in contending with the devil, when he disputed about the body of Moshe, presumed not to bring against him blasphemous accusations, but said, Yodhe will rebuke you. But these blaspheme that which they do not know, and that which they know naturally, like unreasoning beasts. In these they corrupt themselves, woe to them. When they blaspheme, like unreasoning beasts, when they do these things, they corrupt themselves. Woe to them, because they have gone in the way of Cain and have themselves to the delusion of Biliam for a reward and perished in the rebellion of Korah. The book of Judas is linking three seriously big names with one another. Cain, Biliam, and Korah. So there's the way of Cain, Biliam, and Korah. But these blaspheme that which they do not know. And that which they know naturally, like unreasoning beasts, in these they corrupt themselves. And the fruit of that corruption is that they've gone the way of Cain, gave themselves to the delusion of Biliam, and perished in the rebellion of Korah. So the question is it possible that those three individuals and the spirit behind those three individuals are actually what Pinchas saw? Because if those three things are actually what Pinchas saw, then he saw this mess and says, not near the tabernacle of Yodhe-Vavai. These are rocky reefs in your love feast, feasting with you, feeding themselves without fear, waterless clouds borne about by the winds, late autumn trees without fruit, twice dead. He's not mincing with words here, right? Twice dead. I mean, it's like dead physically and dead spiritually, it's dead. I mean, it's dead sure dead. I mean, if you're part of Cain, Biliam, and Korah, you're dead. Doodste. Pulled up by the roots like wild waves of the sea, foaming up with their shame, straying stars from whom blackness of darkness is kept forever. Whew, I'm glad the book of Jude is only one chapter. I mean, imagine there was a second chapter. Yeah. But what the book of Jude is telling us is that, hey guys, be on the watch out. There's going to be a situation where there's going to be a time where these three individuals and the spirit of those three individuals are going to work together. And when the spirit of these three individuals are working together, it's trouble. So, what is the way of Cain? We've discussed it about last year, October. It's theology of corruption. Darkness covers his actions while knowing the truth. He's mocking, blaspheming, Yodhe-Vavai. Spoke evil things he knows nothing about. So where you see things of blaspheming, knowing the truth, you're dealing with the spirit of Cain. Darkness covers his actions. Nee, ek weet nie waar hy nie. I don't know what he did. Darkness covers his actions while knowing the truth. theology of corruption. Delusion of Biliam is the theology of mixing or replacement theology, where you replace gods with one another. False syncretistic prophets and teachers mixing various spiritual and common matters. Theology of mixing, replacement theology. You're dealing with Biliam. And Korah, theology of manipulation. Usurping power and rejecting authority and the autonomy of others. When you are saying, I am in control. When you deliberately create leadership crises. Leadership standing up against leaders. Leaders disregarding other leaders. Usurping power. So when you see those three things together, theology of corruption, theology of mixing and replacement, and the theology of manipulation, you're dealing with the spirit of the beast man. Not saying that person is the beast, you're dealing with the spirit of the beast man. And that's what Pinchas saw. He saw the spirit of the beast man in action. Those three things. And by seeing that, he realized what he's dealing with. He's dealing with the arch enemy of the tabernacle, of the temple, of the worship of Yodai-Vavai. He's dealing with the arch enemy of the covenant. And because he's dealing with the arch enemy, the spirit of the beast man, and he acted accordingly, what did he got? Everlasting priesthood, going forward into the millennium. What's the possibilities of the beast man operating in the spirit according to those three individuals right before the millennium? Well, Pinchas, you won the prize of the covenant of peace going forward. Your seed, your children will operate in the millennium temple. We've just read it, the children of Tzadok. There's going to be a beast man. So we're going to see the spirit of Cain, Biliam, and Korah operating before the millennium. Now, if the spirit of Korah, Biliam, Cain is going to operate before the millennium, it's going to require Pinchashim, priests, to operate like Pinchas did, for them to enter into the millennium. Like Pinchas did. Pinchas saw the spirit of the beast man. He acted. He and his seed gained the millennium. We've read it. The beast man, we anticipate, is to reveal himself at some point in time. And also the spirit of the beast man. And Cain, Biliam, Korah running rife in our time. So we're going to see replacement theology, manipulation, and corruption of truth exploding everywhere. And then it's going, where's my Pinchas? I see a lot sitting here and other places. Because Cain is the theology of corruption, knew the truth, blasphemed, and mocked Yodai-Vavai. Biliam, the theology of mixing, replacement, testing, replacing Yodai-Vavai's word. And Korah, the theology of manipulation, usurping power, rejecting authority. Are we not seeing those three things at this hour? Like absolutely crazy. When they are operating together, it's an absolute lethal mix. Doesn't mean that a person that operates in this way is the beast man. It's just operating in the spirit of the beast man. There's a difference between the two. Just make that very clear. That when a name jumps to mind, that person is not necessarily the beast man or the anti-Messiah. He's just operating in the spirit thereof. So, Psalm 106 is incredible. They then despised the pleasant of the land. They did not believe his word. It's exactly what Cain did. He did not believe the word of the Father. And they grumbled in their tents. That's exactly what Korah did. So he lifted up his hand in an oath against them to make them fall in the wilderness and to make their seed fall among the Gentiles and to scatter them in the lands. And they joined themselves to Baal Peor and ate slaughterings made to the dead. Bileam. He's connecting these three individuals again in Psalm 106. Cain, Korah, and Bileam. And then concludes with, and Pinchas stood up and intervened, and the plague was stopped, and that was reckoned to him for righteousness to all generations forever. So even Psalm 106 is recounting this. Be on the watch out. Cain, Korah, Bileam operating together, and make sure you're on Pinchas' side. So let's go in fast forward mode to today, for example. What is today's date? The 4th of July. So, needless to say, when you think about 4th of July, then you think about a country that is celebrating an appointment today. So, needless to say, I was also reminded of that. So, in fast forward mode, because they've gone the way of Cain, which is then the theology of corruption, where you know the truth, but you've turned your back on it. And through that, you mock, you blaspheme, Yodai Wafai. Let's see whether we can find an example of that. So we've shared this last year. We said, I've done what nobody else has ever done for 3,000 years. And 13 October of last year. And in the process, he said, another one, 22 January, that he's going to be the one that's going to redeem Israel, which was followed by a statement this week that there will be no Israel without me. So you can see the escalation. And I'm reminded of the fact that, so who is the one acting as the guarantor of the word of our Father? Trump or Yodai Wafai? He knows the truth. He openly blasphemes. He openly walks in the way of Cain. This is an incredible statement to make. There will be no Israel without me. So, who acts now as the deliverer? Who acts as the Savior? Who acts as the one that all the things that we've read in Ezekiel 34 about the planting of the trees? Who's the one that's going to provide that golden future? Trompie. That's what he's saying. He blasphemes. So, what's the chances, if he qualifies for Cain, that he can qualify for the others as well? Well, let's have a look. The delusion of Bileam, mixing, replacing our Father's word. Whew. This is a heavy one. So, he's been prayed for many times before. He knows the truth. There's no question about that. How is he signing his messages nowadays? I'm not going to repeat that. I'm not going to say those words. That's how he is now signing his messages. Not one. There's another one. And there's another one. So, if you thought that's bad, look at this. The delusion of Bileam. I'm not saying he is the beast man. Operating in the spirit of the beast man. This last picture is just like I mean, outlandish. This week, he released a video, an AI-generated video, where he was the doctor. He was having a white jacket on, say, Trump MD, printed on it, where he will heal people of their TDS, their Trump derangement syndrome. And he then went through a whole process of where he as doctor will cure all the world of their derangement. Released it earlier this week. Okay, so Cain, yes. Biliam, yes. What about Korah? What's the chances? Theology of manipulation, usurping power and rejecting authority of others. Okay, so I am the boss at the G7 where all the leaders of the world was together. I'm the boss. Claiming that he is the most powerful person that has ever walked this planet. Nobody does it better than me. And there's this individual that has written it down 10 times where he made those statements. A post where he says he tops every conqueror who ever lived. Nobody can do it better than me. And he splits leaderships. And he's got no regard for any other leadership. He operates like Korah. So what we've got currently is a world as a king who knows the truth, but chooses to mock Yoreh-Wahweh. With unlimited arrogance, test Yoreh-Wahweh by replacing him in shameless idolatry, while manipulating and usurping power and reorganizing global alliances. And it's this reorganizing of global alliances which is really of important matter to us at this moment. But before digging into that for a moment, let's just think about what happened and what the Bible is telling us. And they joined themselves to Baal Peor. You've seen those images? Those are his posts. Those are not me saying. This is his words. I mean, I'm just a copier. 8 slaughterings made to the dead. Okay, so that's what he did. So when you joined yourself to Baal Peor, like the way that he did, 8 slaughterings made to the dead. Thus they provoked him with their deeds, and the plague broke out among them. Those are heavy words. And in the process, he continuously carries on, completing the isolation of the nation state of Israel, where they are now isolated. When the previous war, which became a non-war, which was then open war, and then was a closed war, and then it's a deurmekaar war, started to take place, I was wondering what was going on, because it's not necessarily a war that's actually been prophesied. And so at first I didn't pay much attention to the war. This is the one that has got a piece, but it's not a piece with straits open and closed, that's not open and not closed. And it's a bit confusing. And at first I didn't pay too much attention to it because I can't see it in prophecy. But then I realized at one point what was happening through this war. And it is the fact that the global alliances are being changed. The partnerships and who sits around which fire changed. The consequence of that was the isolation of the nation state of Israel. Oh yes, and that had to happen at some point in time. And I was wondering, how is that going to happen? How is the isolation of Israel going to happen? It has happened through this past war. And so we see the spirit of the beast man. And again, please make a separation. I'm not saying anything about the individual himself. I'm just saying he's operating in the spirit of the beast man. Not saying he is anybody specific. He's got a name. He's just operating in the spirit of the beast man. And but the consequence thereof is the isolation of Israel. And which, on one side, you can say, oh, it's terrible. Other way, you can say, oh, it's good. I mean, you can take both positions. At some point in time, everybody who's a believer in Yodhe Vavhe must realize that our faith is in Yodhe Vavhe and not in anything else. Also, the people in Israel. They cannot depend on America or on the IDF or on anything else but Yodhe Vavhe. So somehow we had to get to this point where they are totally isolated and say, oh, crikey. We're down this road now. We can actually ask the question, how did we end up here again? And I couldn't resist the temptation of asking that question because, I mean, we've seen the movie in Pinchas and the consequences thereof. And it's playing itself out again. It's Cain, Bileam, and Korah in operation at once, simultaneously, in the same person and persons, and it's a lethal mix. And a consequence thereof is the isolation of the people of Yodhe Vavhe. Because the people of Yodhe Vavhe cannot go with the spirit of Cain, cannot go with the spirit of Bileam, and cannot go with the spirit of Korah. Must stand up against it. And so we're going to see this spirit of the beast man increasing and increasing, which means that we're going to see the spirit of Pinchas rising up and rising up and rising up, taking their position in strength and in power because of Yodhe Vavhe. And so that leads us to an application, because now it comes near to us. Because the question is, what do we do here where we are? It's easy to talk about a country very far away from here and leaders very far away from us. But many of us are sitting in situations where we are being faced and confronted with that spirit every day in different situations. We can see the consequences of Cain, who operates with knowledge but choose to corrupt. Bileam, who choose to live in mixing, and Korah, who choose to have disregard and disrespect for leadership. When you put the three things together, you realize that you've got the seed of total anarchy. And the consequences of anarchy is death. And so, what does it take to save lives? Pinchas saved lives by speaking the truth and by acting. And so, just one slide on the application. This reading is about Pinchas and what he did and his exploits and what he saw. But actually, it's about leaving a legacy. It's actually about building a kingdom. The rest was necessary elements towards it. And so we have to write our stories there, in our different places where we operate, at home, at work, in family, and where we function. What is our zeal and passion? We sang about it. Are we ready for battle? Are we ready for action? If we see something wrong, we operate. I don't recommend murder, but you have to act against whatever you see. Have a focus on the covenant. Cherish the future. The children of Tzadok, if I may put it this way, is in a sense waiting for us because it has been prophesied. While drawing near to him. Because we know that there's a people, a land, a Torah, a rule book with a spirit, worshipping the King. All joined together with a covenant of peace, to which all of us are being invited. As a matter of fact, all the people of the world is being invited to this. We have to choose to operate in the spirit of Pinchas against this other spirit. And if we do that, there will be an inspired legacy that lasts and lasts forever and ever. And so each one of us are invited to this incredible legacy-making period. And so when we read the news and we're exposed to it and we see everything, what do we see? Yes, opportunity. Pinchas. Let's go. Not like, oh, yes, have you seen this? No. This is a legacy-making opportunity that has revealed itself. And it's asking for a person, a spirit-filled believer of Yoreh Wafai to step into that gap and to operate. Let's pray. Our King and Master, what an incredible privilege it is to be invited by the King of the universe, the one who has given his covenant of peace, Hineni, to Pinchas, to join in the battle. And as we see the spirits of Cain, Bileam, Korah on operation in and around our midst, even this week in our country, anarchy, hatred, division, fighting, lawlessness, corruption, blasphemy. As we see these happening around us, multiplying around us, exploding, we take courage from Pinchas' story that you're inviting us because of the blood of Messiah, because of what your Son did, to set your name apart and not to allow idolatry, blasphemy, mixing, corruption in your midst, but to be set apart people. We are to expect this, but we are not afraid of it. We will see it more and more as time goes forward, by more and more leaders, by more and more people. But we will not run away from it. As your children, your trees, part of your forest, Ezekiel 34, we are committed to your name and the holiness of your name, worshiping you and you only. There will be no other God, because you are the Almighty One, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who has set us apart by the blood of Messiah. And therefore we pray that by your Spirit and by your word, that you will help us to see as Pinchas saw, that you will help us by your strength, by your courage, by your power, by your inspiration, to act as Pinchas acted. And the more as we see the time draw near. And we do that with a loving heart towards you and your people, because we realize that as we operate in zeal for you and for your name, lives will be saved. And therefore we pray in this hour for our family members, for our children, for our colleagues who are still ignorant about you. And you can mention their names now in silent prayer, people that are close to you. And be zealous for them and for their lives. We bring these people before you, O Creator El, while there's time. in the name of our Messiah, Yeshua. Amen.